Today, we are celebrating the birthday of a hero. Mejidrضا Rehneward was executed on December 12, 2022, during the Women Life Freedom protests. His arm, tattooed with Leo and sun, was broken before he was barbarically hanged from a crane. The Sevener Front rightly declared this day the day of Leo and sun, the symbols of the true flag of Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the Sevener Front for this invitation. I bring you warm greetings from our Dutch Iran Free Committee, and to chair this committee, let me say it, is no more than a very humble gesture to the good and noble cause for a free, democratic Iran under the rule of law. Allow me to say that having been listed myself as a terrorist agitator by the Ayatollahs, I only feel more resolve to foster your good and noble cause. Iran and the fate of the Iranian people have been one of my greatest concerns in recent decades. When I served as a Minister of Foreign Affairs of my country, I've often been confronted with the saddening high human risk situation in Iran. Every day, I really try to imagine the situation in which ordinary Iranians, and also, of course, and especially dissidents, find themselves. It is almost unimaginable what the courageous dissidents inside and outside Iran have to endure. Ladies and gentlemen, during the Nazi regime, my parents and the rest of my family experienced firsthand what totalitarian tyranny does to people. Arbitrary government, terror, unlawful arrest, extrajudicial execution abroad, persecution for who you are, and ultimately being murdered in concentration camps. As a professor, I have spent my entire academic life teaching students and practitioners how a democratic constitutional state functions. At the same time, we all know that states, including democratic states, of course, must put their national interests as a pivotal concern. But as a minister during the so-called Arab Spring, I saw how our national interests were and are linked to what is happening in the Middle East. The Iranian regime has done everything in its power to suppress the aspirations of Middle Eastern people to live a life of peace, democracy, and prosperity. For a large part, due to Khamenei's Revolutionary Guard, Syria and Iraq became battlefields. Ladies and gentlemen, our committee has constantly alerted the Dutch government and other authorities about the extraterritorial activities of the Revolutionary Guard and the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence. The Ayatollah regime uses drug cartels, organized crime, gangs, to carry out attacks on dissidents, also in my country. We had, for instance, 3 attacks orchestrated by the Guard in the Netherlands. As a result, 2 Iranian dissidents were murdered. The 3rd attack failed. This is why actually at the moment, with the inclusion, by the way, of the Russian Federation, of Russia, a country like the United Kingdom considers Iran and Russia to be a serious threat to national security. And this also holds for my country. That is also why our Free Iran Committee entered into talks with the Dutch government to cut off Khamenei's tentacles from Europe. These days, steps are being taken here and there. Of course, that is far from being enough. Your safety in Europe is deeply linked to the national security of the EU countries. That is why I am fighting to call upon Kaja Kallas, the High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security and Vice President of the European Commission, to really eventually put the IRGC, the Guard, on the EU's list of terrorist organizations. We are pressing for that for years. It has still not happened. And this must be done for the sake of Europe's security. And do not forget, the Iranian regime is supplying deadly missiles and drones to Russia to sow death and destruction in Ukraine and give impetus to Russian threats to the rest of Europe. So here we are united in our concerns today. The massive demonstrations during the Women, Life and Freedom movement have touched all civilized people around the world. In The Hague, I have recently seen with my two eyes, one of those brave Iranian women who lost an eye during the demonstrations. The Iranian regime deliberately shot at the eyes of women and young men who voiced their protests on the street. Elahe Tavakolian was invited by our Freedom Committee to speak at our Parliament's press center about the situation in Iran. And I can tell you, this brave woman, in the presence of a number of political leaders of the Parliament, Dutch Parliament, explained the intense cruelty of the regime against its own people. I and many others in the audience felt and feel extremely humbled by such and so many other breathtaking stories of Iranian dissidents. The Islamist regime in Tehran functions by means of violence, lies, corruption, disinformation, and deceit. Your struggle is a struggle for truth, and as it was added, rightly so, dignity. Truth is the greatest enemy of a totalitarian state. For 45 years, the regime has been trying to turn dissidents against each other through lies, corruptive practices, threats, violence, and deceit. No despotic regime has as many opponents inside and outside its country as the Ayatollah regime. Yet, it still has managed to constantly sow division among the dissidents in the diaspora. That is why it is so important, ladies and gentlemen, that liberals, social democrats, others have set up this 7 Aban movement to create solidarity and unity among dissidents. History teaches us how important that unity is among democratic forces fighting tyranny and dictatorship. And the Seven Band Front, for that matter, must do everything in its power to form a broad and well-organized front inside and outside Iran. The territorial integrity of Iran must not be called into question. Respect for religious and ethnic minorities must be pivotal. By the way, Prince Reza Pahlavi holds a prominent place in all this. Not only is he one of the most famous Iranians in and outside Iran, he has also, throughout his life, let's face it, shown and practiced his ardent dedication to your cause. I fully agree with him, let me be very clear about that, a bit political message. I fully agree with him that at this moment, the form of Iran's future regime after regime change is not the issue. What matters now is the overthrow of the Ayatollah regime, and on your part, unrelenting preparations for a transitional government. The establishment of democracy, the rule of law, the separation of the state and religion, and human rights are the ultimate goals of your struggle, which I fully support and endorse. Iranians do not want to be part of the Ummah of Islamists. They rightly want to be part of a proud nation. That is why the pro-Iran movement, Iran Garai, is becoming increasingly popular, both inside and outside Iran. On the ruins of the Islamic Republic, Iranians will build their own and proud nation state. And that is, by the way, why Iranians say, not for Gaza, not for Lebanon, I will give my life only for Iran. Here, ladies and gentlemen, let me add that the Israeli strikes against nuclear and military sites on Iranian territory are not part of a war between Iran and Israel, nor a war between Iranians and Israelis, but it is a war between Israel and the awful regime of Supreme Leader Khamenei and his Revolutionary Guard. Don't let yourself misled on this. The Dutch government, my government, yesterday declared that it, I quote, regrets the Israeli attacks against Iran and urgently asks for a diplomatic solution. I can say, as a free citizen of my country, I can have open critique on my own government. I can say that my government misses the point. What's the case? The last IAEA report at last has openly concluded that the Iranian regime, the Ayatollahs, simply cannot be trusted and are a master of trickery and deceit. And here, Israel does not only fight its preemptive struggle on behalf of its own people, but for the benefit of all nations that detest dictators and cherish, on the other hand, our common values. And for that matter too, it is right now, these days, high time to intensify the preparations to bring an end to the Ayatollah regime. Ladies and gentlemen, in your pursuit of a free Iran, please keep in mind that the Islamic Republic cannot be reformed. The so-called reformists within the regime, and some also in the diaspora, all too often manipulated by the Ayatollahs, and being, let's face it, all too often the favorites of naive foreign media and pseudo-experts, only want to ensure the survival of the despotic regime. So beware of those reformists, including the self-exclaimed reformist president, the president at the moment. Dear friends, Iran can once again be a beacon of enlightenment, peace, dialogue, and peaceful coexistence in the Middle East. The road to peace in the Middle East ends in Tehran, but without the Islamic Republic. Our Dutch Committee for a Free Iran is, of course, willing to help you wherever necessary and possible to create a broad front against the regime. I personally, as a chairman of the Committee for a Free Iran in the Netherlands, recommend, as an addition, to set up similar committees in other European countries, including Belgium. Dear friends, my message is clear, I hope. Trust each other in the diaspora. Be tolerant to each other. Unite against the monstrous regime of the Ayatollahs. Thank you.